Hi everyone, welcome back to Grandpa's Garage. In this video series, I'm going to be building a 41 Willys Coupe on an S10 chassis, as it showed in the opening credits. And for those of you who are coming back, I hope you've seen the previous 4 episodes. This is number 5 in the installment. We'll be talking about engines. Just giving you an update on the project overall. It's late March. Next weekend, I'm heading for Ohio. Scott's supposed to have the body done. I got all kinds of questions for him. Then I'm going to get it off to the paint shop. Well, anyway, enjoy, subscribe if this is relevant to you. And I hope there's information here that'll help anyone on any project they're building along the line of a custom car. When you purchased a 41 Willys Coupe back in 1941, this is the engine it came with. This is called the Go Devil. It's a little 60 horsepower inline 4-cylinder, and it got the car down the road just fine. Now, it didn't take long for the hot rodders to realize that there's enough room under that hood for a V8, and so they started transplanting, and thus was born the gassers and the street rods, 41, the pre-war Willys Coupes. Now, you can still find some of these engines out there if you're a purist, and you can put it in there and it'll go down the road, even with this fiberglass body on a Chevy S10 chassis. But chances are you want something a little more power. So we're going to dedicate this episode to the power plants you're most likely to be putting in your project. When it comes to the engine for your project, you more or less have 3 choices. The crate motor, which is a good value. That's kind of expensive, but it's rebuilt professionally, tested, broken in, and you have a pretty good guarantee that the engine's going to run and perform for you as you like. If you go this route, you need to know a lot of things about the crate motor that you've purchased, because other things downstream, such as your transmission, torque converter, things like that, it makes a difference. If you're a hobbyist, you can rebuild a motor. It does cost less, but you really have to know what you're doing. If you put the wrong components together, you may run into some trouble. And again, you may already have an existing motor you can just want to transplant into your project. This is kind of a rare opportunity, but it does happen, and you still need to understand a few things about engines to put it all into your project and have it turn out the way you want. Whether you buy a crate motor or build one yourself, you kind of have to have the idea in mind of what you're going to use this vehicle for, so you can make the right choices of your parts or the motor itself. Since this is a series of videos about the 41 Willys on an S10 Coupe for drag racing oval track, this is the wrong platform. Off-road, yes, if you start with a 4-wheel drive S10 chassis, you could make yourself a pretty unique looking mini monster truck. And some people are even putting electric motors in here, but for the most part, most of you are building a street rod, show car, daily driver type of vehicle. If you're going to rebuild your engine, you have to take a systems design approach. You have to understand all the factors that go into an engine that can make a difference in its performance, and pick the right parts that give you the desired output. You kind of have to understand this too if you go to buy a crate engine, because it helps you understand the design of the crate engine a whole lot more and know which one exactly is the best for you and your project. When you go to purchase a crate motor, if that's your option, you'll notice some of them are called strokers. What that means is it's got a longer connecting rod between the piston and the crankshaft, and the crankshaft's offset is a little bit, is larger. The result of this is a higher cubic inch displacement, and it gives you more torque. You've now got the piston has to travel further, which kind of takes a little bit of hit of the horsepower. Some people say it's less, some people say it's a little bit more. But you definitely will notice an improvement in torque. And your best applications for a stroker is if you're going to go extreme off-road, if you're going to be towing, a trailer, heavy trailer. And they're a little bit noisier than a conventional engine. But it is a relatively inexpensive way to increase the cubic inch displacement of your engine to get quite a bit more torque. We need to talk a little bit about your engine's compression ratio. Most of you understand what that is. It's the volume of the cylinder at bottom dead center divided by the volume of the cylinder at top dead center. And that's assuming that the valves open and close at top and bottom, which is not the case in most situations. Particularly if you purchase a performance cam of any kind. And then you also have to take into your account the timing of the spark. And all this makes a difference in the compression ratio. Now, it's kind of a complex formula. I'm not going to explain it here. It would take a lot of time. But if you go on the internet, you can find dynamic compression ratio calculators. Some of these are very good. It takes into account, as I've mentioned, the timing of the opening and closing of your valves and your spark timing and a whole lot of different dimensions of your engine. You have to match your fuel grade to your compression ratio in order to optimize the efficiency and performance of your engine. And to prevent knocking, this self-detonation of the engine. It can be pretty destructive to an engine. You don't want to build an engine with such a high compression ratio that you kind of have to scrounge around and add additives to your fuel. You want to be able to get pump gas, at the pump. And well, of course, unless you're racing. Now, some people will wonder, is there a relationship between compression ratio and engine power? The answer to that is yes and no, because there's so many other factors that can go into an engine to improve its horsepower, yet still have the same compression ratio. Let's start talking about engine parts. We'll start with the pistons. You kind of have two choices, hyperutectoid or forged. The hyperutectoid is an aluminum piston, high-strength aluminum. It has a lot of advantages. It weighs less, for one, so the work the engine has to do, just in its normal operation, is less. As a result, you get better emissions, reduced scuffing on the cylinder walls over time. They do last longer, but you do have to have your crankshaft balanced. You could go forged. It's less expensive, known performance, and you don't have to rebalance your crankshaft. A lot of people, when they rebuild, they go this route just because that's what they're comfortable with. Let's talk briefly about cams. Now, most of you know that your selection of your cams can depend on what the application for the vehicle is. Now, what might surprise a lot of you out there is the difference between what's called a flat tappet and a roller cam. OEM engines use what's called a flat tappet lifter. Looks like most engines looks like about a D-sized battery, and it's actually the part that a special alloy that's hardened and treated so that it rides on top of the cam and lasts a heck of a long time. It follows the shape and pushes the little lifter up and down. And a roller kind of has a wheel rather than just a flat surface that bears on the cam. And I went with a roller, and the reason why is I've got a buddy that designs engines professionally. He said a lot of the parts are coming out of China and they're not following the specifications as they should. Your roller is going to outlast your flat tappet, so that's why I went with that. In cylinder heads, you'll probably hear some debates between what's better, iron or aluminum. There are some virtues to aluminum. It does dissipate heat faster. That's where most of the heat in the engine is an issue, is in your cylinder heads. And it does weigh less. Your V8 aluminum heads weigh about 60 pounds less. So, but your difference in performance comes from the geometry of your intake port. You want to have a geometry that moves that air in nice and fast. You have lots of swirling, which improves the efficiency of the engine, burns more fuel in the cylinder as a result. And your exhaust port chamber size. This plays a big factor in your compression ratio. A larger chamber size translates to a lower compression ratio. So then you have your port geometry, which is important when it comes to your selection of exhaust headers. They're either round, oval, or square, and you have to match those or you have too much heat lost in your exhaust headers. It's diverted to your exhaust headers and causes them to fail early. Then there's what's called your valve spring constant. A higher K value is a stiffer spring, and when you have to know what your cam is designed for, because different cams need to pop up and down a little faster than others, and a higher spring constant causes that valve to open and close a little bit faster. And it's really should be specified. Let the guiding factor be the design of your cam. Now, in your air fuel delivery system, some people still like their carburetors. These are usually the older school guys. But almost everybody, including the auto manufacturers, is going to fuel injectors because you can improve efficiency, improve your emissions, and increase the life of the engine by exact control of the fuel injectors. You also can get better atomization. It's just a smarter way to go. Now, we're talking about the intake. So let's pop out to the garage. I want to show you my air fuel system. There's all kinds of intake manifold designs. I went with the Edelbrock ProFlow XT, purely from an engineer's perspective. Up front is the throttle valve. All of them have it. All the intake systems today have a throttle valve rather than a carburetor. And then behind it, here's this large chamber inside. There's nothing in there. It's just a big open chamber in there. But what it does is each one of your runners running down to the cylinder head now has pretty much the same pressure and velocity. And that maximizes the efficiency of the engine, gives you more power and better performance, better fuel burning in the cylinder. It really is a smart design. The results on the engine labs do show this to be a pretty high performance intake system. About the only way you can beat it is to go by using a boost system, which now we'll go back and talk about. Most of you are going to be putting a V8 in your Willys project. And frankly, any V8, no matter how small it is or how big it is, has got plenty of power without having to put in a booster. I presume you guys know the difference between turbos and superchargers, so I'm not going to lecture on that. So why would you want to boost your engine? Well, those are the guys that do that on their Willys. Unless they're drag racing, it's purely for show. It just looks cool. It's vanity. It's more power than you'd ever need. The same with nitro. You really don't need nitro on there, but it looks cool under the hood of a show car. And nitro is kind of dangerous for the engine anyway. But it's just cool stuff. So if you do decide to rebuild an engine, there are some steps that need to be performed by a competent engine shop. The first thing they do is they use a Magnaflux process to verify there's no cracks in your block or other parts of your engine that you want to keep, such as piston rods, your crankshaft. They've got the tanks there, they can clean it inside and out to make sure it's all as clean as it's going to get. They'll bore and hone the cylinders. They'll true the crankshaft size and replace the crankshaft bearings. They'll balance the crankshaft if you go with a hypertectoid piston, and they'll grind your cylinder heads. After that, it kind of just nuts and bolts, put it all back together, more or less. There's some other tricks. But I hope this has been informative and help you make a decision as to whether you want to go with a crate engine or rebuild it yourself. One thing that I need to talk about here in closing is when it comes to mounting the engine to the chassis. You'll notice your motor mounts are up toward the front of the engine. It's not at all balanced in the center of gravity of your engine, which means you're going to have to support the back end of the engine until you've got your transmission on and your transmission cross member to support your assembly from the back end. I used some ratchet straps that I attached around the chassis and got it good and tight, and then I backed it up with some large wooden blocks underneath there in case the ratchet straps broke when I wasn't watching. But anyway, you need to plan all these things in advance so that when you go to put the engine in, you're not surprised. Okay, let's talk about the engine accessories. Now, this particular engine, the stock location for the alternator is up here. I prefer it one way or the other, but the reason why is because I have a forward-facing throttle valve, and if I put my alternator up here, the belt will interfere with a snorkel. I want to put a snorkel here that will come forward of the radiator and get cool air. Cool air improves performance. That's why your guys in the drag race have an intake air chiller. I'll also put a compressor for my air conditioning system here. Living in Texas, you gotta have air conditioning. And I like power. I've got a power steering box over here for the steering thing. I just want to keep the system as it was. There are some loop backs you can get on this, so you can go to a manual steering system instead of having a power device. And well, it gives you a bit of stiff steering. It's not as stiff as when you lose power on a power steering unit, but it's just a little bit stiffer. And I just kind of like power steering. The radiator, Scott recommends one with the pinched nose. It's an air radiator. Comes out of is designed for a '66 Mustang. You can buy them online, brand new. I prefer something that's down low so that my air intake can come over the top of it, and with two shroud fans. Everyone, that kind of wraps up our discussion on engines. I hope we gave you enough knowledge that you can make a decision on it. If you decide to go with the crate engine, it's a good decision to make. Again, it's a hobbyist's venture to rebuild your own engine. A lot of factors to consider. The next episode, I'm going to talk about transmissions. And so stay tuned, hit that subscribe button if you'd like, the like button and all that stuff, be nice. And make comments. I will get back to you if I can. Well, I will get back to you.